Hello there, Gotta Go Fast enthusiasts. My name is RidersDX, and welcome to this week's rendition of Riders Talk, where today I'm actually hours away from getting into a car to go to Canada for a week. And so today I was like, oh, I don't have like a Riders Talks video for next week. I need to think of something like fast and stat, like something quick, something easy. And so I got to brainstorming, and then of course I came up with an idea that has resulted in like all these pages of notes. So we're gonna try to make this as fast as we can, but it's literally 11 o'clock at night right now. I gotta get into that car at like 9 a.m. tomorrow, and I have to record and produce and upload this video before tomorrow morning. So we are in it for the long run. But I do think that this is like a very important topic, and I'm feeling very, very hyped to talk about right now because it really does give you a sense of how far we've come as a Sonic community and how far I've come personally as a fan of Sonic. Because truth be told, looking back on it and really understanding what was going on, I was legitimately not a Sonic fan for 4 years. There was a period of time when I did not give a rat's ass about whatever Sonic was doing. And it's crazy to think about that because Sonic is everything to me. Like, he was everything to me when I first discovered him. In fact, I recently came out with a video where I talked about how I got started with Sonic, and that was through the game Sonic Heroes. And so feel free to check out that video afterwards. That made me realize just how important Sonic is to like my life, and the fact that there was a period of time when I just did not give a care or a damn about Sonic is still really fascinating to me. The more I think about it though, the more that I feel like after you watch this video, you might feel like you had a similar era. So let me know in the comment section after watching this if you felt a similar way that I did during this time. And so it's crazy to me to think about this because when I first got into Sonic, I was on the computer, I was joining message boards, I was creating like animated music videos on YouTube back when those were still cool. I was even like modding Sonic Adventure DX. Like, this was how into Sonic I was. After a little while, I simply stopped. I put an end to all those activities. I didn't watch a single Sonic creator on YouTube anymore. I was just completely over Sonic for 4 years. And so you might be thinking, well, Riders, what was this 4-year period? Like, what happened during those 4 years? And so let's go ahead and take a look. So the 4 years where that happened was actually through 2013 to 2017. I'm sure that that period of time isn't a really big surprise to a lot of people that are watching this, especially if you're somewhat familiar with Sonic, because those were some pretty rocky years for Sonic, if we're going to be honest here. Looking at the games that came out during that era, it seems obvious as to why that would be my era where I literally stepped away from Sonic. I mean, Lost World came out during then, Sonic Boom, the complete failure that game was, came out, and Sonic Forces came out at the end of that era too. But the thing with this is that I didn't even play those games. Like, I didn't even want to go buy them. I was not interested at all in the games in general. And I do believe that seeing the reception of the games afterwards only like legitimized my disinterest in Sonic. But I was not even crazy about the games from the very start, even when they were announced, because I remember Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric looking somewhat decent when it first got announced. Sonic Lost World looked kind of decent when it first got announced as well. Like, you would have think I would have been at least a little bit hyped for Sonic, but I legitimately consumed almost no Sonic content during that time period. So to actually break down my sabbatical from Sonic, we need to go a little further back than 2013, and the year I really want to touch on in particular is 2010. Most Sonic fans will know exactly what happened in 2010. There was this random, not that important title at all called Sonic Colors that came out during that year. And Sonic Colors came in during a very interesting time within the franchise's history because this was coming off of numerous games like Shadow the Hedgehog, Sonic 06, and Sonic Unleashed. A lot of games that were not received well by like the critical audience at all. And Sonic was really in a very low point when it comes to like critical acclaim and respect. Sonic games have been kind of going in this direction for a while up to that point of being like these dark, lore intensive storylines that really push Sonic and Co into these situations and really develop the characters as characters. It felt like with Sonic Unleashed we were starting to step away from that a little bit, but you still had like the whole Dark Gaia like storyline that was happening. And so in 2010 we got Sonic Colors, which was a game that changed way more than we could have ever anticipated. I want to say before we get into this that like gameplay wise, Sonic Colors still deserves its flowers. I feel like people love to rag on Sonic Colors nowadays, especially with that very mediocre port that happened with Colors Ultimate. But Colors is still a very solid game gameplay wise, and I still go back to it and have fun playing it. Like, it's still like a very solidly built game, even if it's mostly 2D, which is a fair criticism. I mean, the 2D is still fun. Like, what do you want me to say? If there's one thing I'll admit, it's whether or not a game is actually fun. And Colors Ultimate, I'm sorry, Colors is fun. But besides the gameplay, Colors also affected the overall tonal direction of Sonic the Hedgehog. And so Sonic Colors was the first game to have these new writers on board. I don't even know what their names are anymore. Like, I don't want to remember them because they're terrible. I'm sorry, they're absolutely terrible. But Sonic Colors had a very significant narrative shift from Unleashed, from 06, from Heroes, from the adventure games. It was a lot more goofy, a lot more nonsensical, a lot more pun and joke heavy. It was almost like a Saturday morning cartoon, you know, kind of similar to what you were watching for kids. And it was just a completely different tone for Sonic. It almost felt like a more modernized version of Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. It de-emphasizes the intricate lore, de-emphasizes the character relationships, all in the name of a simple storyline that doesn't get in the way of the gameplay, and also puts Sonic in a light-hearted mood. I will say I was very happy to see my favorite series get like the critical acclaim it deserved. I mean, Sonic Colors got 8 out of 10s like across the board. It was a very well-received game. And so I was like, okay, you know, maybe the storyline isn't offering what like I really love and the overall like tonal like feel and direction I love about Sonic the Hedgehog, but Sonic really needs a win right now. He really needs some good grace built back into his reputation. And so I was willing to, you know, go with it for that time. Sonic Generations came out in 2011, and this was also a very solid game gameplay wise, and it also was a really fun title in terms of like going back and be a little nostalgic about all the previous eras. But there was also something about this game that was very similar to Colors in terms of like the ambition, the tonal direction, and just the overall like scope of the game. It felt like a very small scope game, despite the fact that we were traveling in time and going to all these different areas from all these different games. It felt like a very small, low budget, like scope kind of game. And that's how I felt about Colors as well. And I guess what I want to say is that Colors and Generations, while they were like very solid games, it didn't really have like that sense of like, oh, I'm gonna be the best fucking thing in the world and everyone's gonna love me kind of feeling, you know? I felt like Sonic Unleashed was very cocky in that way. Like, it knew that it was going to be hot shit. Even if everyone like disliked the Werehog or whatever, it knew that it was going to go out there and just be epic and just lay its mark and be a legendary game in the franchise. I feel like Colors and Generations, just for lack of a better term, just played it safe. You know, they wanted like a very simple storyline. They wanted straight up gameplay. They didn't want to put in any gimmicks or any twists to make things more muddied and such. They just wanted to put out like simply solid, good games. And that's what those two games are. They're solid, good games. And the franchise really did need that at the time. But again, I think I just grew up in an era of Sonic where like story was important, like character interactions was important, like the scope was important. I grew up in like the era of like Sonic Adventure, Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Heroes, where the adventures were epic and felt like they meant everything in the world. And Colors and Generations just had this lack of like energy to them that I still feel to this very day. And so I felt like with those two titles, it was like, okay, I have a good idea of what the Sonic franchise is doing now, and I'm not really sure if this is what I prefer versus what I grew up with, you know? And I think once we entered that 2013 to 2017 era, when I saw the games like what they were when they were announced, I just kind of felt like I was getting a bit of the same vibe from them. And I think I just progressively lost interest as that happened. I also have to mention though that this was when I was graduating high school, and I was just like, there was 10,000 things going on in my head right now. Like, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. I wanted to figure out like what my interests now were as an adult compared to like a teenager. Like, there was just a lot of shit going on besides Sonic, and I wanted to be a grown-up with grown-up tastes. So I wanted to be known for playing games like Mass Effect and Assassin's Creed, and colorful platformers like Sonic just didn't really have room for me anymore. And when you have games like Colors and Generations that, while are decent, don't really give you that sense of excitement that the original games did, then I guess you do just naturally fall out of love with what you loved as a kid. And that's a little tragic, but I mean, I obviously found my way back. So by the time Lost World was announced in particular, I was just super disinterested. First of all, it looked a lot more like a Mario game than a Sonic game. It was also on the Wii U, and there was no fucking way I was getting a Wii U at this period. I was just like, that was a dead console on arrival. And then the reception finally came out for Lost World, and I was just like, I think that Sonic just doesn't have it right now, and it might take a while before he finally gets it. This is also coming off of like years and years of being disappointed with Sonic, because because, you know, I went through Shadow the Hedgehog, I went through Sonic 06, I went through even Sonic Unleashed for a sense, and now I'm about to go to Sonic Lost World as well. It just felt like it was too much, you know, like too much disappointment, along with the fact that my tastes were changing, along the fact that the franchise itself was changing. Like a lot of things that used to like meld together like this no longer melded. I think Lost World is when the switch literally finally clicked in my head and I was just done. Like no more Sonic. And that breaks my heart saying it because I love Sonic and he really had nothing to give me during this period. Sonic Boom looked even more unappealing when it first got announced, and we obviously know how that turned out, and so moot point. I actually did end up trying out Sonic Forces when it first came out. Like I did kind of hear about it. I didn't really keep track of it in terms of like the news and such, but when it did come out, I did try it out, and I think I played it for like 2 days and then I was done. I was like, Sonic still isn't giving me what I need, and I'm just like, what is going on with this franchise? Like it just there's nothing to see here anymore, and that feels really sad, but I think that really was the case during this era. Like Sonic just didn't have a lot to offer. It was bad. I was done. So what is it exactly that got me back into the franchise? Well, to keep it simple, it was this YouTube channel. When I started uploading videos to this channel again, I was in the midst of like pharmacy school, and it was just a very intense year of schooling in particular where I just needed some kind of retrieve. I needed some kind of escapism, and for some reason I just decided to start doing a let's play of Sonic Heroes on this channel, and that was really great because it started to remind me a little bit of why I love Sonic so much in the first place. It really gave me this real sense of nostalgia, and I definitely was reaching that age when nostalgia was becoming a real thing. Little did I know that this random choice of uploading a let's play to this channel would eventually lead to where I am now. I mean, I honestly had no like sense that this channel could ever be successful. I honestly was just thinking that like pharmacy school sucks. It really does suck, and I need something else to take my mind off of it, and it just felt like a YouTube gaming channel felt like the way to do it. And I don't know, doesn't make a lot of logical sense now that I think about it because it's a whole lot of work itself, but we're here and I'm happy to be here, and I'm hoping to be here for a lot longer. But with this channel, it eventually led me to covering Sonic games a lot more in depth, even though I kind of was like out of the Sonic franchise at this point. And so Team Sonic Racing was the very first Sonic game that actually got me some real legitimate hits on this channel, and that's sort of what really started getting me like paying attention to the Sonic franchise again. Of course, the Sonic movie was announced, and that was just a huge controversy, a huge chain of events, and that got me even more invested in Sonic. It just like, okay, so I was now back into Sonic just because it made sense for me as like a YouTube content creator. Like I was making Sonic content, I should be talking about whatever Sonic's doing right now if he has news. And so I was covering Team Sonic Racing, I was covering the Sonic movie, and I was definitely starting to feel like Sega was making content that was appealing to me as a Sonic fan, you know, appealing to what I grew up with. Like Team Sonic Racing has a lot of references to the adventure games, and the Sonic movie doesn't really have as many references, but it did help to revitalize Sonic as a franchise. It made the general public a lot more interested in him. It just made covering Sonic seem a lot more exciting for me as a content creator. But now I gotta say, in the recent years of Sonic, I feel like Sonic is actually starting to find himself again, and I'm actually starting to see a lot of signs of what I loved about Sonic when I first got into him. And so the first game I really want to talk about when it comes to that is Frontiers. Frontiers to me is not the perfect Sonic game, but it's a Sonic game that shows so much potential and so much like ambition and fearlessness in a way. Even though the game definitely seems a little bit puzzled in terms of like what it ultimately wanted to do, it did show a sense of fearlessness I haven't seen since Unleashed, to be honest. And that's really exciting for me because when you have a Sonic game that believes in its scope, that believes that's the hot shit, that believes it can be bigger than it actually is, then that's when you get Sonic's most magical moments, in my opinion. Like you can date this all the way back to the original Sonic 1 when that game came out, when Mario was like the defining platformer. Sonic was like, oh, I can be defined too. I'll make platforming that's fast paced. You know, it's like, it sounds kind of delusional at the time. And when Sonic is really in his bag, believes in what he's doing and just delivers on it, that's when I feel like the Sonic franchise is at its very best. And I feel like Frontiers was a great sign that shows that we're going in that direction. And now the recent Shadow generations feels like we're going in that direction even more, because now we're really embracing that past and really embracing the core storylines that people fell in love with during the adventure days. And it feels like it's another like game that believes in its scope. It looks so much more exciting compared to Generations, the remaster. Like it just seems like even though this is a more specific game covering Shadow, it feels like a much more exciting game than Generations ever was going to be. And So it just feels like Sonic believes in his own hype again, and that they're making games for Sonic fans rather than trying to appeal to the most broad audience possible. Like, we're getting Sonic games for Sonic fans. And I guess ultimately, this is how Sega eventually has won me back. They are rediscovering what makes Sonic so special, and they're leaning into it. And that's great because, you know, when you get like a successful movie, an obvious choice might be to like broaden Sonic even more, like make him even more kid friendly, make him even more like generic to like appeal to that audience. But what they're doing instead is they're honing in on what makes Sonic special. They're focusing on what makes him unique, and they're expanding that and making that the vocal point. And I just feel like Sonic's back, man. Sonic really does feel like he's back, and I couldn't be prouder to finally get back into him. And looking back at how he did lose me for a good while and how I eventually came back to him, it's like I was never gonna leave forever. Like, Sonic was always gonna come back into my life one way or another, but now I feel like unless Sega starts messing up for years and years on end again, Sonic is back permanently. Like, there's just no way I'll ever stop being a Sonic fan again. He is just too important, too ingrained in my DNA at this point that Sonic will always be Sonic, and I'll always be here for it. Sonic lost me because he lost himself, but now that he's found himself again, he's also found me, and that's that on that. But all right, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Can you relate at all to my like experience with Sonic? Let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts. And just yeah, thank you all so much. I'm hoping I'm enjoying my time in old Canada right now. So this is Riders riding out.